Tell them, David. Stand up there and tell every single person in this building who you really are. Nicole's voice cut through the entire church like a knife. 3,000 people go completely silent. The worship band stopped mid-chord. A child somewhere in the back starts crying and is quickly hushed. David Carter stands at the pulpit, gripping the podium with both hands. His knuckles are white. His face has lost all color. He leans toward the mic and his voice comes out low and careful. The voice of a man trying to hold something together that is already falling apart. Nicole, I am asking you, please don't do this here. She laughs. It is not the laugh of someone who finds anything funny. It is the laugh of a woman who has been holding something unbearable for so long that laughing is the only thing left. Don't do this here. Here is the only place you ever showed up, David. This building, these people, this stage. You gave everything to this place and left me with nothing. She turns to face the congregation. 3,000 people stare back at her. Her hand is trembling. Ask your pastor where his best friend is this morning. Ask him why Marcus isn't in that seat. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. Then the back door opens and Marcus walks in. He is dressed in a dark suit, moving slowly, like a man who already knows he is walking into the wreckage of something he helped destroy. He stops when he sees the congregation all turned toward him. He stops again when he sees Nicole. And the moment their eyes meet across that crowd, something passes between them that every single person in that building can feel. Something unspoken, something intimate, something that has no business existing between a pastor's wife and his best friend. David sees it. He sees all of it. He steps back from the mic. His arms drop to his sides. His voice, the voice that has held 3,000 people breathless every Sunday for 12 years, comes out as barely a whisper. Marcus. Marcus stands still. He does not speak. He does not move, and his silence says everything that words cannot. David closes his eyes. He stands there at that pulpit for 3 long seconds with his eyes closed and 3,000 people watching him, and when he opens them again, the pastor is gone. What is standing there is just a man who built everything and is watching it burn in real time. He looks out at his congregation one last time. Then he walks off the pulpit and through the side door, and the door closes quietly behind him. The church erupts. How does a man like David Carter end up standing in front of everything he built and walking away from it? To understand that, we have to go back 3 years, because this did not happen overnight. It never does. David Carter grew up hard in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was the kid that teachers gave up on and streets tried to claim. By the time he was 19, he had a record, a reputation, and nothing else. Then a church took him in. Not a fancy church, a small one with folding chairs and a second-hand sound system, and a pastor who looked at David like he saw something worth saving. That was enough. David gave his life to that church and never looked back. By the time he was 36, he had built Grace Fellowship in Atlanta from a living room Bible study into a 3,000-seat congregation with a live stream, a school, a food bank, and a staff of 40. He had a beautiful wife named Nicole who gave up her career as an interior designer to stand beside his vision. And he had a best friend named Marcus Webb, the man he had mentored from nothing, the man he trusted with everything, the man who sat in that chair beside the pulpit every Sunday and made the ministry feel like family. From the outside, it was a perfect life. From the inside, it was a different story. David, dinner is getting cold. Nicole stood in the doorway of his home office holding a plate, her voice patient in the way that patience starts to sound like pain. It was a Tuesday evening. David had been at his desk since 4 in the morning. He looked up briefly. "Give me 20 minutes. I need to finish the outline for Sunday." She set the plate on the corner of his desk. She looked at him for a moment. He had already looked back down at his screen. She walked out without another word. That was 3 years ago, and it happened like that almost every night. Not because David was a bad man, but because he had made the church into the highest expression of his love and forgot that love still needed to show up at the dinner table. Nicole carried it quietly. She was a pastor's wife. She smiled in the front row every Sunday. She hosted the women's brunches. She volunteered for every building committee and every outreach drive and every event that needed a gracious face at the front. She poured herself in and told herself it was enough. But there is a kind of loneliness that does not announce itself. It builds slowly, quietly, in the spaces that a busy man leaves behind without noticing. And Marcus noticed. Marcus Webb had been David's best friend for 15 years. He was warm where David was commanding, approachable where David was authoritative. The congregation loved them both. Marcus knew every name, every story, every struggle in that building. He remembered which single mother needed her car repaired and which teenager was quietly falling apart behind a perfect attendance record. He was also in love with Nicole. He had been for years. He buried it. He served faithfully. He gave the toast at their 10th anniversary dinner with a smile that never cracked. He told himself it was nothing. He told himself that every time he noticed her. But 3 years ago, when the distance between David and Nicole grew wide enough to walk through, Marcus stopped telling himself anything. He started showing up instead. A phone call when David was traveling, a coffee after a board meeting, a conversation that lasted longer than either of them planned. Nicole told herself it was friendship. She needed it. Someone who listened. Someone who asked how she was and actually waited for the answer. But somewhere between the late conversations and the evening David forgot their anniversary for the second year alone and Marcus showed up at the house with flowers and a card signed simply from a friend, friendship became something neither of them had a clean name for. And somewhere in that church, someone was paying very close attention, and what they were about to do with what they saw would bring the whole thing down. Lunch became a habit. Not every day, not even every week, but enough. Enough to become something they both looked forward to without saying so. Enough that Marcus started finishing his morning meetings faster than he used to. Enough that Nicole started paying attention to what she wore on the days she knew he might stop by. They told themselves the same story. Friends, ministry family, nothing more. But a story told long enough starts to feel like truth. It was a Thursday afternoon at a restaurant in Buckhead, one of those quiet upscale places where the booths are deep and the lighting is low and nobody pays attention to anyone else. They had been there 2 hours. The food was long finished. Neither of them had moved to leave. Nicole was laughing, really laughing, the kind that reaches the eyes and stays there. Marcus was leaning forward with his elbows on the table, watching her with an expression he was not fully controlling. She caught her breath and shook her head. I cannot believe you said that to the deacon board. To their faces. Marcus leaned back and smiled. I said what needed to be said. They were wrong about the budget and everybody in that room knew it. Nicole shook her head again, still smiling. David would never. He would find 4 diplomatic ways to say absolutely nothing and call it wisdom. The laughter faded slightly, David's name sitting in the air between them like a door neither of them wanted to open. Marcus turned his water glass slowly. How is he? Nicole looked out the window at the street. Busy. Always busy. The new building expansion is all he talks about. We had dinner together last week for the first time in... She paused and counted quietly. 17 days. Marcus said nothing. He just watched her. She turned back and caught his expression. She looked away quickly. Don't look at me like that. His voice was careful. Like what? She set her glass down. Like you feel sorry for me. I don't need that, Marcus. He leaned forward slowly. His voice dropped. It is not pity, Nicole. She met his eyes. She held them for 1 second too long. Then she picked up the menu, even though they had already paid the check, and changed the subject. Marcus let her, because he was smart enough to know that some doors open better when you do not push them. David noticed nothing. This was not because he was a careless man. David Carter was one of the sharpest people in any room he entered. He read people for a living. He had to preach the way he preached. But there is a particular blindness that comes from a man who has convinced himself that building something great is the same as being present.
David had decided long ago that the church was the highest expression of his love for his family, that Nicole understood this because she always had, and that everything was fine because she always said it was. He was wrong about all of it. The cracks started showing in places David was too busy to look. It was a Wednesday night. David was in Dallas for a ministers' conference. Nicole was alone in the house for the 4th night in a row. She was curled up on the couch with the television on and muted, and a throw blanket pulled up to her chin when her phone lit up on the cushion beside her. The message was from Marcus. It said simply, "Are you okay?" She stared at it for a long time. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at the empty space on the couch beside her, where her husband had not sat in longer than she could remember. Then she typed back, "Not really." 3 dots appeared immediately, like he had been waiting. The next message said, "I am parked outside. I brought food. No pressure. Just let me know if you want company." She closed her eyes. She knew what this was. Some part of her, the part that was still the woman who chose David before he had anything, knew exactly what this was and what it could become. She opened her eyes. She typed one word, "Come in." They talked until 2 in the morning. Just talked. Marcus on one end of the couch and Nicole on the other, with food containers on the cushion between them, like a boundary neither of them crossed. But what was said in those hours could not be unsaid. She told him about the loneliness. He told her she deserved better than invisible. She cried once, briefly, and he did not reach for her. He just sat with it. He was present in a way her husband had forgotten how to be. When he left, he squeezed her hand at the front door. 1 second, that was all. But 1 second was enough. The following Sunday, David preached one of the best sermons of his life. 3,000 people gave him a standing ovation. He walked off that pulpit feeling like a man who had everything. He had no idea what was happening in his own home. 6 weeks later, a man named Gerald Simmons decided he had seen enough. Gerald was 62 years old. He had been a deacon at Grace Fellowship since the church had 40 members and met in a strip mall. He was the kind of man who noticed everything and said very little. He had watched David build something extraordinary, and he had also watched the cracks form in the foundation that nobody else seemed to see. Gerald had a nephew who worked in the church accounting office, and one evening over dinner, his nephew said something offhand about discretionary fund transfers that made Gerald put his fork down. The next morning, Gerald sat across from the young accountant in a back office and slid a printed spreadsheet across the desk. "These 4 transfers," Gerald said. "Walk me through them." The accountant shifted in his chair. "Pastor Marcus authorized them. He said Pastor David approved them verbally for the building project." Gerald looked at the numbers for a long time. Then he folded the paper carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. "Thank you, son. This conversation stays between us." He walked out of that office carrying something that felt heavier than paper. That same afternoon, David came home from a trip to find Nicole sitting at the kitchen counter staring at nothing. He put a gift bag on the counter beside her. He had picked it up at the hotel gift shop, a bracelet in a velvet box. Nicole opened the box. She looked at it. She looked at him. She closed the box gently and set it on the counter. David reached across and covered her hand. He said, "I know I've been away a lot. Once the ground breaks, things will slow down, I promise." She looked at his hand on hers. Her voice was quiet and completely flat. "You promised that last year, David." "Nicole." She stood up. She picked up her keys. She looked at him with an expression that was not anger, because anger would have meant she still expected something different. "The bracelet is beautiful. Thank you." She walked out of the kitchen. He stood there alone with the empty gift bag in his hand, and for the first time, something moved through his chest that was not quite suspicion, but was not comfort either. The particular unease of a man realizing he may have left something precious unattended for too long. He almost said something. He almost called her back. He didn't. He went to his office instead. He had a sermon to finish. It was their church administrator, a sharp and quietly ambitious woman named Sandra, who had worked for Grace Fellowship for 4 years. She was underpaid and overlooked, and she had smiled through all of it with the patience of a woman waiting for the right moment. She was walking to her car one Thursday evening when she noticed Nicole's car still in the parking lot, long after everyone else had gone. She glanced toward the building and saw a light on in the small conference room on the ground floor. She almost kept walking. She didn't. She moved closer. The blinds on the window room were half open. Inside, she could see Marcus and Nicole standing close together. Too close. Marcus was holding both of Nicole's hands and speaking intently to her. Nicole was shaking her head. Then she stopped shaking her head, and the look that passed between them in that moment was not the look of two people who were just friends, and everyone who had ever been in love would know it immediately. Sandra stepped back from the window. Her hand went to her mouth. She stood there in the parking lot for a long time, turning over what she had just seen and what she could do with it. Then she took out her phone. She did not call David. She opened her camera instead. Some people carry secrets because they want to protect someone. Sandra carried this one because she had been passed over for a raise 3 times in 2 years, and information in the right hands at the right moment was worth more than any salary adjustment. She just had to wait for the right moment. She did not have to wait long. That Friday night, an unknown number sent David Carter a photograph. He was sitting alone in his office preparing Sunday's sermon when his phone lit up on the desk. He picked it up, he looked at the screen, and everything he thought he knew about his life rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. He sat in that office for 6 hours without moving. The sermon never got finished. But Sunday still came. It always does. Everything is about to detonate. David has seen the photograph, Marcus is walking into that church, Nicole is already unraveling, and Gerald Simmons has a folded spreadsheet in his shirt pocket that could bring down the entire ministry.
The morning of the explosion begins like every other Sunday. The worship team arrives at 6. The ushers iron their uniforms in the back room. The camera crew runs sound checks and adjusts the lighting rigs above the stage. 3,000 chairs sit in perfect rows beneath lights that cost more than most people make in a year. Outside, in the parking lot, cars are already lining up on the street. People who drove from Marietta, from Decatur, from Stone Mountain, because Grace Fellowship on a Sunday morning is not just a church service, it is an event. It is home. David is in his dressing room behind the pulpit. His jacket is on, his tie is straight, his Bible is in his hand, but he has not opened it. He is sitting in the chair in front of the mirror staring at his own reflection, like a man who does not fully recognize the person looking back at him. He has not slept. The photograph has been open on his phone since Friday night. Marcus holding Nicole's hands, Nicole looking up at him. The conference room that David himself approved the renovation budget for. The church he gave 20 years of his life to build. His assistant knocked on the door at 8:30. He told her he needed 5 more minutes. That was 40 minutes ago. Then the door opens and Sandra walks in. She closes the door behind her and stands with her back against it. She is dressed for service, but her composure is not quite right. There's something rehearsed about the way she's standing, like a woman who has been preparing for this conversation. David does not turn around. He speaks to her reflection in the mirror. You sent it. Sandra lifts her chin slightly. I thought you deserved to know the truth. David is quiet for a moment. Then he turns in the chair and looks at her directly. His voice is very calm. How long have you known? She hesitates. A few weeks. He nods slowly, the nod of a man filing information away. And the transfers from the discretionary account, did you know about those too? Her composure shifts, just slightly. I only found out recently. David stands up. He straightens his jacket. He picks up his Bible from the table and holds it at his side. Sandra, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to go and sit in that congregation and I want you to worship. Can you do that? She blinks. She was expecting something else. Pastor, that will be all. His voice is not angry. It is something quieter than anger and more final. She opens the door and leaves. David stands alone in the dressing room. He looks at himself in the mirror one more time. Then he walks out toward the pulpit. Nicole arrives at the church at 8:45. She does not know that David spent the night in his office. She does not know about the photograph. She walks in through the side entrance in a burgundy dress, composed and elegant, and she is halfway down the corridor when David steps out of a doorway directly into her path. They stop. 2 feet apart. The hallway is empty. David looks at her for a long moment, not with anger, with something closer to grief, the look of a man studying something he loves and is terrified of losing.
Nicole sees something in his face and her composure shifts. David, what is wrong? He reaches into his jacket pocket. He holds out his phone with the screen facing her. The color drains from her face instantly. She does not reach for the phone. She cannot move. She stands there looking at that screen, and the silence between them fills up with everything that has been unsaid for 3 years. David's voice is very quiet, the quietest she has ever heard it. Is there anything you want to tell me before we walk into that building? Her mouth opens. It closes. Her eyes fill with tears, but not tears of denial. They are the tears of a woman who has been caught, but who also has things of her own to say, things she has been swallowing for years. Her voice comes out as a whisper. David. David pockets the phone. We will talk after service. He walks past her toward the pulpit. She stands alone in that corridor with one hand pressed flat against the wall, and she does not move for a long time. Marcus arrives at 9:10. An usher tells him that Pastor David wants to see him in the green room before service. He walks in relaxed, unsuspecting. He is straightening his jacket and mentally running through the morning announcements when he steps to the door and sees David standing in the middle of the room with his arms folded and his eyes steady. Marcus slows down. He stops. Something in the room is wrong. The air itself feels different. David looks at him for a long moment without speaking. When he finally speaks, his voice is level. 15 years, Marcus. Marcus opens his mouth. David takes one slow step forward. 15 years I gave you. I found you when you had nothing. I gave you a title, a platform, a salary. I stood in front of that congregation and told them you were my brother. I defended you to people who questioned you. I trusted you with my ministry, with my finances, with my family. His voice does not rise. It stays completely level, and somehow that is the most terrifying thing about it. Marcus looks at the floor. His shoulders drop. David's voice drops too. Did you touch my wife? The room goes completely still. Marcus's jaw works. His hands are trembling at his sides. He does not answer, and his silence is the loudest thing that has ever been said in that room. David takes one step back. Something in his face goes completely flat. Get out of my church. Marcus looks up. David, just let me get out. But before either man could move, the door opens and Nicole walks in. She stops when she sees them both. She takes in David's face and Marcus standing there with his head down and the wreckage already filling every corner of that room, and something breaks open in her. Not guilt alone, something older and bigger than guilt. An anger that has been buried under years of Sunday smiles and empty dinner tables and beautiful bracelets from hotel gift shops. She looks at David and her voice comes out trembling but deliberate. I was going to tell you. After service, David holds up one hand. His eyes close briefly. Her voice rises. No, David, you do not get to silence me, not today. I have been silent for 3 years in this marriage and I am done. David's voice comes out strained. Silence is not what I am asking for. This is not the time or the place. She steps forward. Her voice breaks open completely. Then when is the time, David? When you get home at midnight? When you cancel another anniversary dinner because the elders need you? When is the time for your wife? The room goes silent. David stands there looking at her, and something happens behind his eyes that has not happened in a long time. He stops being the pastor. He stops being the leader. He stops performing. He just stands there as a man looking at his wife and seeing, maybe for the first time in years, how much pain is living in her face. His voice comes out scraped and raw. I did not know you were that lonely. Nicole's face crumbles. I know you didn't. That is the problem, David. You didn't know. You stopped looking. The three of them stand in that green room in silence. Marcus has not moved from his spot near the door. He looks like a man who understands the full weight of what he has done and has nowhere to put it. It is Gerald Simmons who walks in 30 seconds later looking for the pastor because service should have started 6 minutes ago. He pulls the door closed behind him. He walks down the corridor and up the side steps and onto the stage. He takes the mic from the stand. 3,000 people look up at him. His voice is steady and warm and carries the authority of a man who has served this church since it had 40 members and folding chairs. Good morning, Grace Fellowship. Pastor David is handling something important this morning. We are going to worship together and then we are going to pray together because this church is a family and every family goes through seasons. What matters is that we go through them together. Worship team, take us in. A murmur moves through the congregation, but Gerald holds steady at that mic until the music starts, and slowly, row by row, 3,000 people begin to worship in a building where the pastor is in a back room trying to save what is left of his marriage and his ministry at the same time. The green room takes 2 hours. 2 hours of the hardest conversation 3 people have ever had. Marcus tells the truth. All of it. Not just about Nicole, but about the financial decisions he made without authorization, the transfers he approved in David's name without David's knowledge, the shortcuts he justified to himself because he believed in the vision, even when the methods were wrong. When it is over, Marcus resigns. He does not make a speech. He does not ask for grace. He simply says, "I am sorry," and means it in the deep, wordless way of a man who has run out of anything else to offer. He drives to the airport that afternoon and books a flight back to Cincinnati where he grew up. There are no dramatic goodbyes, just a man carrying what he chose and walking with it alone into whatever comes next. Gerald Simmons presents the financial findings to the elder board the next week. Everything is laid out. Everything is accounted for. The board votes to bring in an independent auditor and to implement new financial controls. It is painful and public and necessary. 2 other staff members resign in the weeks that followed. The story makes it onto a local news segment. For a while, the church feels like it is standing in a strong wind, but it does not fall. David takes 3 months away from the pulpit. He and Nicole begin counseling, alone first and then together, with a therapist in Midtown Atlanta who has no connection to the church and no interest in protecting anyone's reputation. It is the hardest thing David has ever done, harder than building the church.
Sitting across from his wife week after week and listening to what his absence cost her is a kind of reckoning that no sermon could have prepared him for. He is a different man when he returns to the pulpit. Slower, quieter, less polished. The charisma is still there, but there is something underneath it now that was not there before. Something honest, something that has been broken and put back together and is not ashamed of the seams. The congregation receives him with more love than he has ever felt from them. And Nicole is there in the front row, not performing, not smiling for the cameras, just there, present, choosing one day at a time to believe that the man she married before the building and the crowds and the live stream is still inside him and is finally, at last, finding his way back to her. They are not all the way back. Real things do not fix overnight, but they're in the same room, facing the same direction. And for now, that is enough. What part of this story hit you the hardest? Was it the betrayal, the silence in that green room, or the moment David finally saw what his absence had been costing the woman who believed in him from the very beginning? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you. There is something this story wants to leave with you before it ends. The most dangerous distance in a relationship is not the distance between 2 cities. It is the distance between 2 people sitting in the same house who have stopped truly seeing each other. David did not lose his wife to a better man. He lost her to his own absence, to meetings that could have waited, and sermons that could have been shorter, and anniversaries that should have been kept. Do not let the things you are building become the reason you lose the people you are building them for. Look up from the work. Look at who is standing beside you. See them while they are still there. It is never too late to turn around, but do not wait until Sunday morning in front of 3,000 people to finally start paying attention. If this story moved something in you today, please like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We want to know. God bless you, and we will see you in the next one.